What does it mean to love one another? Is it an emotion of the heart, an act of service, a force of the will? Can love ever truly be defined? We think so often in simple terms, but real love goes much deeper. It strengthens the weak, helps those in need, lives in harmony with all people, and holds us accountable. Love means carrying each other's burdens, admonishing and instructing, showing compassion and feeling it too, spurring one another to good deeds, confessing and forgiving, building and maintaining trust, being of one mind no matter our differences. Love means accepting others for who they are and allowing ourselves to be changed in the process. So love holds us together, grafted by faith into the one true Christ, whose example compels us to love one another.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the River Church. I'm Pastor Mark Helsel. Standing next to me is Pastor Dean Ward. We are the pastors at the River Franklin Park and the River New Ken. Welcome to our online worship experience. If you're watching this in Franklin Park or New Ken, hey, do us a favor, like this, subscribe, share it, share it like crazy, right?
Amen.
Just keeps it like Dean does. He shares it like crazy. Well, hey, we are excited. This is the last week of our series called Fight Like Jesus. And we couldn't be in a better place than right here behind me. We are at Jack's Boxing Gym on Perry Highway. And really excited to be here. Jack is a former Marine, I believe, former Pittsburgh police officer, and now he owns Jack's Gym. He's a friend of he's related to one of our congregants at the River Franklin Park, and he was nice enough to let us film here today. Jack's story is amazing. Jack Mook, look it up. You'll be impressed. His story probably will end up as a movie one day, because he was this older single guy who adopted these two boys out of really difficult situation. Pretty amazing story. That's Jack Mook. Look it up, Google it. It's worth it, and you will be blessed by it. So definitely check that out. So Dean, glad to be here.
I am thrilled to be here. I felt a little bit like Penn and Teller there for a minute, where Mark's doing all the talking and I'm just the goofy mime. I'm so grateful to be here, Mark. Thanks for lining this up. Just so we're clear, I have no boxing experience whatsoever. Whenever we started at the gym, when I started working out at the gym 2 years ago, they would have this one exercise where we take these 5-pound weights and we would have to punch. It started with 5 pounds. Now I'm up to 12 pounds.
Did I tell you that you're getting in the ring?
No, I'm not getting in the ring.
Oh, wait, no, I set that all up.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll have to see about that. But I remember I would stand there and I would like just do the weights like this, and he goes, Dean, act like a fighter. And I'm like, I don't know how to fight. So in this series, we want to help you learn how to fight. And we hope that the past 4 weeks and this message as well helps you learn how to fight like Jesus fought as he waged peace during Holy Week. And we're so excited to break down this final message today on It Takes a Team to Make the Dream Happen. Come on and join us now.
So we've been going through each day of Holy Week, and today brings us to Thursday. And Thursday is kind of the beginning of the main event. So here we go. Things are going to ramp up. Things are going to get real quick. And so on Thursday, Jesus gathers his friends together, his disciples together, to celebrate the Passover meal together. The Jewish meal of independence. It was to celebrate their independence from the Egyptians. So he gathers them all in that upper room, and we know the scripture right before the one I'm about to read, Judas leaves, and right after Judas leaves, this is where we pick up in John chapter 13, verse 31. It says, when he, Judas, was gone, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once. Some people have called these next couple days as Jesus's humiliation. Really, it's Jesus's glorification. We're going to see Jesus at his best. Not even though he is going to be humbled, we see him at his best. Verse 33, my children, so he turns to his disciples, my children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. And then he says this to them, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. That's really the heart of what we're going to look at today. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. This is the heart of what we're talking about what it means to learn to fight like Jesus. So people who are Jesus fighters, people who learn to fight in the ways of Jesus, to wage peace, to bring shalom, as we've talked about every week. Jesus fighters learn to love like Jesus. Now, you might have noticed in this passage that Jesus says, this new command I give to you. And you heard the words, love each other, whatever, and you thought, well, what's new about that? I mean, hasn't Jesus been teaching about love and showing people to love and saying things like love your enemies? Yes, absolutely. So you might ask, what's new? What is new that he gives here? Well, it's right in the text. Jesus says, love one another. He doesn't say love each other. He doesn't say that first. He says, love one another as I have loved you. So Jesus says, the standard of what I'm calling you to is to love each other as I have loved you. I'm the standard. I loved you in a certain way. I gave everything. And he's just got done actually washing their feet. And just one day later, they're going to see him give his life on a cross for them. And I wonder if they heard the words then in the back of their head going, love each other as I am loving you right now. Love each other as I have loved you. Jesus sets the standard. He doesn't say love your neighbor as you love yourself, because we know we're really bad at loving ourselves sometimes. And so we'd be really bad loving our neighbor sometimes. He says, no, you got to love people like you've been loved. Love people as you have been loved. That's the standard that Jesus sets. Love as you have been loved. Now, when I read that passage, I think about another passage in the book of Ephesians chapter 5. And this is what it says in verse 1. It says, follow God's example. Or as I learned it growing up, it said, be an imitator of God. Follow God's example. Be an imitator of God. Now listen to this. Therefore, as dearly loved children. Why do you imitate God? Why are you called to imitate God and to follow God's example? Because you're already loved. You are a dearly loved child. And because you're standing with God, is you are standing in love. You are standing as a person who's been loved. Now go and love well. I've already showed you how to love well. You've been loved well. Now go and love well. That's what Jesus is teaching. And Jesus fighters learn to love as Jesus loved. We learn to love as he loved, as our example of how to love. That's what he's called us to. That's what he's called you to. That's what he's called me to learn to love like that. And that's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to learn to love like that, because that love is defined by the word sacrifice. And that word love is defined by humility and humbling ourselves and putting others above ourselves. And that's the way that Jesus loved us. That's my part of the message. Dean's going to jump in here in a moment, but watch this video and we'll be right back in just a moment.
In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is asked the question, which is the greatest commandment? He answered, love God with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And then again, at the Last Supper, he says the same thing, but with a twist. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples. This time, Jesus replaced your neighbor with one another. This new love that Christ commands of us goes much deeper than the Old Testament commandment he was quoting in Matthew. The people we have been commanded to love has expanded beyond our neighborhoods to include, well, everyone. And this includes people who might make this commandment a bit difficult, like that confrontational coworker who just seems impossible to get along with, or your in-laws who've never treated you like a part of the family, or maybe the person you just met, who you don't even know and really need some help. You see, Jesus knew his physical time on earth was nearing an end. So in this new take on the old commandment, Jesus also made another change. The words "as yourself" became "as I have loved you." Wow, that's a tough act to follow. Christ's sacrificial life provides a clear and concrete example of real and true love. And he put this love on display on a daily basis with his disciples. He was patient with them, speaking kindly and showing great concern for their welfare. He instructed, counseled, and comforted them, prayed with them and for them. He admonished them for wrongdoing, and yet compassionately bore with their failings. And most of all, he gave his life, dying so that they and we might live. According to Jesus, this is how others will know that you are one of his followers, not because you have a shirt or a bumper sticker that says so, not because we announce it from a stage or a blog or a status update, but because they look at you, at how you live, the things you do and say, and they see Jesus. They see love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video and caught the nuance of what Mark was talking about, this new command that we have been giving to love others as Christ has loved us. And I hope that you take that to heart. Hey, we have a little surprise for you that we weren't really planning on. When we were filming in the gym, perhaps you've heard some of the boxers working out. Well, we were filming, and this one very energetic, apparently photogenic young lady was quite open to being filmed. And so, Liz, if you'd be willing to come share with us and tell us about your journey here. This is Liz. Liz, what is your, can I ask your last name, or would you? Okay.
Certainly. My name is Liz Mystic. I've been a boxer for about 5 years. I was boxing in New York City for a little bit, and when I moved back to Pittsburgh in 2020, I came to Jack's Gym, and I was welcomed here with open arms, and I couldn't have asked for anything better.
Nice. So what do you like most about the gym? What's Jack like as a trainer and all that?
Certainly. I think what I like most about the gym is the sense of community when you first walk through the doors. You know, Jack works with a lot of kids, a lot of adults, people from all different backgrounds, people with all different levels of ability. And sometimes you'll see boxing coaches that aren't necessarily willing to work with people that aren't already at a certain level in their boxing career. What is so special about Jack and what is so special about this gym is that you can come as you are, be who you are, be vulnerable, and tell Jack what you need and what you want to learn. And he is there to listen, and he is there to teach you. He has a mastery of the science of boxing that you really don't see as much anymore. And it's been such a special experience to be a part of Jack's Gym.
Nice. So, Liz, you are training intensely because you have a rather significant event coming up. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yes, so Saturday, April 2nd at the Northway Christian Community Church, we're putting on an event. It's the Pennsylvania Golden Gloves. I will be fighting for a title fight for the championship at that 139 weight class. I'm so excited to represent Jack's Gym, and I'm so excited to go in there, represent myself as well, and really kick some butt.
Liz, that's awesome. And I love that you weren't afraid to tell us your weight. I mean, I've never interviewed a woman that she was like, oh, here's what I weigh, and I'm proud of it.
Of course, I mean, at the end of the day, we're athletes, and athletes at this sport especially, we fight at our weight classes, and you know, you want to know what weight people are fighting at. I know when I see people sparring in here, even the guys, I'm like, wonder how much he weighs. He's probably like 155, 180. You know, we all just size each other up that way, but it's all in good fun. No shame at all in where you're at and where you want to be. We're all here to support each other.
So if the boxing thing doesn't work out, you could be a weight guesser at a carnival.
I think that would be a good little career path for me, at least a little side hustle.
Nice. So I'm not going to ask you what you think this weighs, but I'm so grateful. Liz, we are a church, and we are just sharing this message here in this gym. Would you mind if I just prayed for you about your event Saturday?
Certainly.
All right, let me pray.
Thank you.
Father, I just thank you so much for Liz. I thank you for her desire to do her absolute best, to train her hardest, and to be the best boxer that she can be. I pray, Lord, that you would bless her Saturday. May she fight well, and may she recall everything that she has learned. And Father, I pray that your blessing would be on her, not just Saturday, but in every area of her life. In your name we pray. Amen. Can't thank you enough for letting us share your story a little bit.
Of course, thank you. Anything I can do to tell this great story of boxing, great story of Jack's Gym, I'm always available. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Well, that was quite an unexpected treat. And I know that there are some of you that are maybe a little uncomfortable with the notion that I prayed for a girl that was boxing. Well, I have to say, I became friends with an MMA fighter, and he would let me backstage before his fights, and I would pray for him. And it was quite uncomfortable praying for him to be victorious in his fight, as I knew he was going to be going to knock the guy out. So it's not my first time that I've prayed for a fighter for God's blessing, but so grateful to be able to meet Liz and hear her story. And she hit something in what she said when she was describing this gym, when she said it's a safe place for different people to come of different backgrounds, different ages. There's no judgment here. It's a great place. And then she said, it's like community. We experience community. And I'm like, wow, she's describing a boxing gym, and it sounds so much like my dream and my hope for church, for the River to be that kind of community. Which brings me to my second point, and that is that Jesus fighters, those of us that are fighting for peace and waging peace the same way Jesus did, we never fight alone. We fight together in community. We form communities of love that welcome others in so that they can experience Christ's love. Now, I don't know if you have ever looked on the program that we pass out as a bulletin in New Kensington, or have gone on our website, goriverchurch.com, but you will see on that website that the River Church exists to help people experience, know, and share the love of Jesus. And we do that in community. And Jesus' love in us and through us is the most transformative power on the face of the earth. And this love is to be expressed both internally and externally. And the problem is, so many churches get so focused just on the internal. They just focus on the people that are within the building itself, and they ignore so many other people outside the walls of the church. And at the River, we are highly committed to sharing the love of Christ both inside the church, among the believers and attenders of the River, and yet never neglecting sharing this powerful love outside the church and doing that in community. That's why every week we film at a different location, not just to keep the message from being boring, but because it gets us out and allows us to proclaim this great good news, this message of love of Christ that transforms people in a community, not just standing behind a pulpit. This series, as I've been saying, is based on Jason Porterfield's book, Fight Like Jesus, How Jesus Waged Peace During Holy Week. And there was a story in this book that demonstrated what it looked like waging peace in community instead of all by yourself. And I wanted to read that to you now, except I dropped my glasses. So I'm going to do what I do every morning in the gym. I'm going to bend over and get up, because that's all he has me doing, because I've gotten really good at it. I'm going to bend over and pick up my glasses because this is in really small print, and I'm 55 years old, and it's a lot easier to read with glasses. So Jason Porterfield says, and it's quite a lengthy story, but I want to invite you to engage with it, listen to it, and hear the heart of what he's saying. He says, when I lived in Vancouver, Canada's downtown east side, which is the poorest neighborhood in all of Canada, I worked hard to extend the love of Christ to my neighbors. He intentionally moved to the most poverty-stricken neighborhood in the entire country of Canada. He said, most days, I walk the streets for a few hours, prayerfully striking up conversations with those camped on the sidewalks. Twice a week, I served breakfast at a local soup kitchen and afterward offered a listening ear to anyone who wanted to talk. I helped convert abandoned lots into community gardens. I regularly attended events at the local community center, and I was always looking for an excuse to treat my neighbors and myself to a delicious cup of coffee at one of the many locally owned cafes. Yet, if I'm honest with you, I must confess that despite all my personal efforts to minister to my neighbors, I saw very little fruit. But here's the catch. I didn't move to downtown Eastside on my own. My wife and I were part of a missional community of Christians, also known as a church, who collectively worked together for the flourishing of those around us. In a neighborhood where loneliness was epidemic, hospitality became our community's primary form of ministry. That is to say, we welcomed people into our home, those who were not normally the recipients of welcome. And once inside, we treated them like family. Did you notice? They didn't treat them as projects. They didn't treat them as needy. They treated them as family. We cooked together, ate together, cleaned the dishes together. We laughed together, cried together, and celebrated even the smallest of milestones together. Many evenings, we'd break out the guitar and sing an eclectic mix of classic rock and classic hymns. Can you imagine that? Sometimes our neighbors gifted us things. Other times, they stole our things. When you minister, there are risks, and sometimes they would steal our things. They inspired us and drained us, blessed us and cursed at us. And often, while waiting to be admitted into rehab, our friends who were homeless came and lived with us. As we welcomed our neighbors into community, lives were transformed. Many broke free of their addictions and got off the streets. Those who hadn't spoken to family in years began to heal severed relationships. Several neighbors committed their lives to Jesus. Some even became cherished members of our community. And one neighbor who joined our community after finishing rehab is now serving in his 11th year as a missionary among the poorest of the poor in Cambodia. Where my personal efforts to love those around me seemed to produce little impact, many of those same neighbors experienced profound transformation when they were welcomed into a loving community. There is power whenever Jesus fighters who are fighting for peace by spreading this love of Jesus commit that they will not fight alone. They will fight for peace, fight for the blessing of others in community. I want to invite you to enjoy this video just simply called Forgetting Love. And in this video, I want you to pay attention to and capture all the verses in Scripture and what they say about the power of love. Let's enjoy this video together.
When did we forget how to love? Did it happen suddenly? Or was it a gradual decline? When did we forget the very foundation of the gospel? For God so loved. Love is what moved God to action. Love is what held Jesus to the cross. Love is what rolled away the stone. But we've forgotten that part. Without love, we are simply a resounding gong, a clanging cymbal, a bunch of noise. Without love, we are nothing. Is that what people see in us? Meaningless, empty noise? Love is supposed to be patient and kind, gentle, not angry or arrogant. Yet in our effort to stand on truth, we have forgotten the very thing these truths are based on. Love. Never once did Jesus fail in this. Not in his heartbreak or his anger. Not in his joy or his betrayal. His default has always been love. Maybe it's time the church was more like Jesus.
May we as a church and as followers of Jesus embrace these verses of love, and may we live them out, not just alone in our lives, but in community. The final thing that I want to point out is that Jesus fighters, we fight for peace and we fight with love with different weapons for a different kingdom. In the background, you can see Jack Mook, the owner of Jack's Boxing Gym, working out with one of his professional boxers that's getting ready for a fight as well. And I hope that you do go on YouTube and look up Jack's story. 15 years ago, there was a story that Good Morning America did on Jack and how he fought for peace and waged peace with different weapons than have been used. And this YouTube video is just simply called Boxing Coach Takes in Two Poverty-Stricken Boys. And in that story, it talks about hope between ropes. And he tells the story of Josh and Jesse, who were two boys who were living in such poverty, and he took them in as foster children, and then 2 years in, he adopted them, and their lives have been changed forever. And they are both here this evening as well, 15 years later, and great to see the difference that Jack has made in their lives, waging peace with a different weapon, a weapon of love and commitment. And Jesus fighters, we don't fight with the traditional weapons of war that we see in our culture today. We don't do that. We fight and wage peace with love, with compassion, with grace, with different weapons. Let me give you an example of this. This week, I experienced what I anticipated would be one of the most painful experiences for me so far in 2022. I noticed my cable bill had gone up inexplicably $25 from last month to this month. And so the painful notion of calling Comcast to find out why, I was not looking forward to it whatsoever. Well, I got on the phone, and you know the routine, you gotta, hit all these buttons, and I quickly learned that if you just keep saying customer service, customer service, customer service, and when they ask you what you want, if you tell them cancel my service, you will get a live person stateside, and I was connected with Robert in New Jersey. And Robert was a middle-aged guy, and I told him my bill went up $25 from last month to this month, and I don't know what happened. And he said, well, let me see. And he goes, well, that's because your account phased out of the 2-year program, and now it's going to be $25 more. And then he said, oh, wait, I see that I can offer you the same plan for the same amount of money if you just stick with me. And so stuck with him. He walked me through everything. I had to, sign off on a couple things that I agreed to. And then at the end, he's like, the bad news is it is going to be more than I said. It's going to be more than you were paying. It's going to be 1 penny more a month. I'm like, well, I can live with that. And I said, Jack, can I just tell you, you have given me the most enjoyable customer experience with Comcast or Xfinity over the phone that I've ever had in my entire life. And I've had many customer service experiences with Xfinity. I said, you're an excellent customer service representative. I said, you do an excellent job. And he said, I know I do. Thank you very much. And then he said, I talked to a lady last week that didn't think that I did. He said, in our conversation, she was saying, you're the worst customer service person I've ever talked to. You don't know a thing about customer service. And she kept going on and on. And I said, well, she was wrong. And he said, yes, I know she was wrong. And this delightful conversation just was such a blessing to me in such an unexpected way, simply because Jack decided to be respectful and kind and listen and do his job to the best of his ability. And it didn't hurt that he was able to get me what I was calling for. And I just thought, I don't know if Jack is a person of faith, but I caught a glimpse of what it's like to have a customer service representative who's committed to bringing the best to their job and doing it joyfully. That's waging peace with different weapons than the world uses. Last story. A friend of mine was flying last week, and she was flying from South Carolina to Oklahoma City, and she had to take a super early flight. And even though she bought her ticket in plenty time of advance, she got to the gate and realized that her boarding pass did not have a seat number to it. So she went to the customer service ticket counter, and they said, well, we're overbooked, oversold, we're working hard to get you a seat. So she was quite anxious. She was not going to make her 5 a.m. flight. Finally, she gets on the flight, and there's no space. All the overhead compartments are filled. The only seat for her was beside the window in an exit aisle, and there's nowhere for her to put her carry-on bags under her seat. And so she asked the guy who she was sitting next to if there was any space above that he could help her get it in, because the plane was packed and the overhead compartments were packed, and he was like, I don't know. And he was not helpful at all. And then so she finally got her bag up in the overhead compartment, and while she was sitting there, the guy's wife let her know that her husband was an executive pastor at a church. And my friend thought, well, that's interesting. He wasn't very helpful to me. And then when the flight was over, he jumped up before the plane even came to a complete stop, and jumped up and opened the compartment and got his bag. And while he was getting his bag out, my friend thought, oh, that's so kind of him. He's going to get my bag and hand it to me as well. Well, he didn't. He only jumped up because he wanted to be the first one off the plane. You know the feeling, don't you? And so she was quite disappointed that this man, whose wife wanted her to know that he was a pastor, represented weapons of peace so poorly. He didn't commit to serve. He didn't commit to bless. He didn't commit to help. On her return flight, she told me, the exact opposite happened. She was placed in a row right next to a turbine engine mechanic that flies to different parts of the country to fix turbine engines. And at the end of the flight, he was cordial, he was kind, he helped put her bag up because he could tell she was struggling with it. And at the end, whenever the flight ended, when they stood up, he said, "Would you like me to get your bag for you?" And she said, "Sure." And she was blown away at how kind, thoughtful, considerate, and helpful this man was. Now, I asked her later, "Do you think this mechanic was a believer?" And she's like, "I have no idea." I said, "Exactly." And followers of Christ, if you're going to let people know that you're a Christian, you better wage peace with weapons of peace. You better commit, if you're going to be outwardly expressing that you're a follower of Christ, as this wife did about her husband, that he was a pastor. If you're going to outwardly express this and let people know this, then you better be prepared to wage peace with new weapons, the weapons of love, the transforming, powerful weapons of love, the weapons of grace and kindness and goodness. And you must commit to being a blessing. And I love that her turbine engine mechanic never even said if he was a follower of Christ, but he demonstrated love and compassion and grace just by his actions. A new commandment I give to you, to love one another as I have loved you. May we collectively and in community love others with the same love that Christ has blessed us with. God bless you, everyone. Have a great week. Go and love.